The rain began as a whisper against the windshield, a soft percussion that grew into a steady, somber rhythm as Emily guided her car down the forgotten gravel road. Ahead, the headlights sliced through a gathering mist, revealing the skeletal silhouette of the old house. It stood as a monument to decay, a place the townsfolk hadn't willingly approached in nearly a decade. The paint, once a brilliant white, was now a tattered quilt of peeling gray, weeping streaks of moss where ivy had begun its patient, relentless conquest. As she stepped from the car, tall, wet grass brushed against her legs, and the air, thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth, carried the ghost of lilacs that had once bloomed along a fence that no longer stood. She moved toward the warped wooden porch, her footsteps swallowed by a damp carpet of fallen leaves. The front door, already hanging slightly ajar, groaned in protest as she pushed it open. Inside, time had stopped. A fine, silver dust coated every surface, a shroud over a life abruptly abandoned. Faded floral wallpaper peeled away from the walls in brittle curls, and from the ceiling, a broken chandelier hung like a captured jewel, its remaining crystals refracting the weak, gray light that bled through a shattered window. The air was heavy, tinged with the scent of mold and the silent, stubborn presence of forgotten memories. Emily paused in the foyer, her mind superimposing the past over the present. She could almost hear the echoes of laughter, the frantic patter of a child's footsteps on the stairs, the faint, tinny music from a radio on a long-ago summer evening. Now, the silence was an oppressive weight, broken only by the distant, guttural rumble of thunder. Each room was a chapter in a story she only half remembered. Her grandmother's parlor, where a grand piano stood silently in the corner, its keys yellowed and mute.
The kitchen, once flooded with sunlight through gingham curtains, was now a domain of shadows, disturbed only by the frantic scuttling of some unseen creature. Her flashlight beam danced across the family photographs lining the hallway. The glass was clouded with age, but the smiles were still there. Her mother as a girl, her grandparents on their wedding day, and a small, toothless version of herself captured forever in a faded holiday sweater. The images were a bittersweet ache, each one a reminder of what was lost, of the life that ended the night a fire consumed the West Wing and the family fled, never to return. This house was more than a relic. It was an archive of secrets. As she ventured deeper, a strange, biting chill seeped into her bones, and she became aware of a low, almost imperceptible hum, a vibration she felt more than heard. The floorboards groaned with every step, and in the periphery of her vision, the shadows seemed to stretch and recoil, as if breathing in time with the storm. She shivered, not from the cold, but from the unnerving certainty that she was not alone. The house felt expectant, as if it had been waiting all these years, just for her. This was not a visit, it was a reckoning. The fog outside grew thicker, pressing against the window panes like a living entity, muffling the world and cloaking the landscape in a silvery shroud. It distorted perception, turning familiar shapes into monstrous outlines. The dense, moist air warped sound, making the distant storm feel miles away, while amplifying every noise within the house. The snap of a twig outside the window sounded like a cracking bone. The rustle of wallpaper felt like a whispered secret. In this disorienting veil, her skepticism, the very reason she had come, began to fray. She was here to prove the family legends were just stories, born from grief and a faulty gas lamp. But as the mist coiled and the shadows danced, her rational mind struggled to maintain its grip.
It was in her grandmother's old reading room, beneath a loose floorboard she remembered from childhood games, that she found it. A small, leather-bound journal. The cover was dark and stiff, stained with what could only be dried blood. It was the diary of her great-aunt, Margaret, a name spoken only in hushed, fearful tones within her family. The infamous Bloody Diary. She opened it, her fingers trembling. The first entries, dated in the winter of 1912, were innocent, notes on the weather, descriptions of family dinners. But as she turned the pages, a chilling transformation unfolded.
Margaret's elegant script grew shaky, frantic. She wrote of unexplained events, doors slamming in the dead of night, pockets of unnatural cold that drifted through the halls, the faint but undeniable sound of footsteps in the attic when the entire family was downstairs. Margaret described the portraits in the hall, how their painted eyes seemed to follow her as she passed. The diary entries grew shorter, more fragmented, devolving into a chronicle of terror. She wrote of waking to find cryptic symbols scrawled in the frost on her bedroom mirror, of hearing her younger brother whispering to someone, or something, in the empty air of his room. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her descent into paranoia was no longer vicarious, it was becoming her own. Every creak of the house now felt deliberate, every shadow a personal omen. The line between Margaret's past and her present was dissolving. She read on, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The final, most disturbing entry was dated March 17, 1912. "Tonight, the shadows are longer," Margaret wrote. "I hear them calling my name from the walls. Mother says it's just the wind, but I know better. Something is here. The sun did not rise this morning. It is still night. It will always be night." That was the night of the fire.
The night the local papers claimed a tragic accident had struck the family. But this diary told a different story. It wasn't a fire they were fleeing. It was the darkness. As Emily read those final words, a deafening crack of thunder shook the house to its foundations. The flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into absolute blackness. Panic seized her. She scrambled to her feet, the diary clutched in her hand, and ran for the front door. It wouldn't budge. She threw her shoulder against it, again and again, but it was as if it had been sealed with stone. She turned to the windows, her hands slapping against the cold glass, but all she saw was an impenetrable, starless void. The storm had vanished. The world outside had ceased to exist. There was only the house and an endless, silent night. A flicker of movement in the foyer mirror caught her eye. She stared at her own reflection, a pale, terrified face staring back from the clouded glass. But for a split second, the image wavered, and it was not her face she saw, but that of another woman, dressed in the fashion of a century past, her eyes wide with the same horror that now consumed Emily. It was Margaret. And then, a new sound, the sound that broke her. Outside, in the suffocating darkness, she heard the crunch of tires on the gravel road. She saw the familiar slice of headlights cutting through a dense mist that was no longer there. She heard a car door open and close, followed by the soft, muffled echo of footsteps on the porch, footsteps that were unmistakably her own. And then a voice, clear and confident, drifted through the sealed door, a voice she knew better than any other. Her voice. "All right, old house," it said, a touch of bravado in its tone. "Let's see what you've got." The loop was unbroken. The night was endless. And the house had a new ghost to whisper its secrets.